Pick it up here, the latest shootout then that we were just referencing in Rosettenville between police and armed criminals in Rosettenville left 8 of the alleged gang members dead. 8 others were then arrested from a group of 25 men who were described by the police commissioner, Elias Mawela, as hardcore criminals. The search continues for others after the arrest of 2 other suspects today. Let's talk more about cash in transit heists in this country and speak to Johan Burger, a familiar voice when it comes to making sense of South Africa's crime problems. He's a senior research consultant in the Justice and Violence Prevention Program at the Institute for Security Studies. Always good to speak to you, Mr. Burger. So you've got now police telling us that they've been tracking this particular gang for about a week and were able to intercept them yesterday. Are we finally beginning to see police intelligence do what it's supposed to do in these cases?
Well, I think, hopefully this is the start of a more effective approach by the police. And I think since they've created their National Cash in Transit task team, and I think that was done in 2020, it does appear as if they are getting a much better grip on the number of cash in transit crime syndicates in the country, and are also able to generate some form of intelligence. To some extent, it appears as if they are assisted by the Crime Intelligence Division of the SAPS. We know they have a lot of problems themselves. But so there are promising signs of improving intelligence and also an improvement in terms of the operational response and the coordinating of the various forces, which includes the Metropolitan Police Service, in relation to tracking down these syndicates and confronting them. So yes, I think there are promising signs.
And Dr. Burger, you've been warning about how brazen cash in transit criminals in this country are becoming from about far back as 2017, 2018, when you were writing about this topic. And I wonder why it's taken this long for police to build up an adequate response, because just in the latest crime report, there was only a drop of 5 cases actually year on year.
Yes, and these crime stats can be misleading, because if you compare this year, this past quarter with the same quarter last year, it's that a decrease of 5. But if you take it back to the same quarter in 2019, 2020, just before the pandemic started, then there was an increase of over 50%. And over the past number of years, of course, there's been this upward trend. And on average over the last decade, there's been 147 cash in transit robberies across the country every year. So it remains a huge challenge. It remains a threat. And, after a shootout like we saw yesterday, you will find a temporary reduction because a number of criminals are taken out, whether they are arrested or killed. But there will be a drop. But in the next 2-3 years, they rebuild their capacity and they will return. So we need a permanent capability, and perhaps we found that now in this new task team. But I'm certain they will have to expand and improve as we go along.
And in Rosettenville, not Rosettenville, but Western area, also here in Gauteng, just this month, in fact, there was another cash in transit robbery. Among the people arrested were a police officer and a member of the SANDF. Would I be going too far by linking that to perhaps how sophisticated these gangs have become and the sort of weaponry that they have access to? I mean, yesterday, the Minister for Police, Bheki Cele, was saying they found rifles, AK-47s, and explosives at the scene.
Yes, it's unsurprising that there are police officers involved. As I said in the past, there's some good research by Dr. Tubani at the University of South Africa, as well as Dr. Henny Lochner, also at UNISA, in a separate study where they interviewed incarcerated cash in transit criminals in prisons, and where they confirmed that without inside help in the form of police officials assisting them in various ways, they would find it difficult to carry out the crimes that they do. So they are able to collate information, they are able to hire firearms from police officials, they have access to case dockets which are investigated about cash in transit robbers, so they can determine what information the police have, whether there were any names mentioned, perhaps people that assisted the police in the investigation, witnesses and so on. And they can either intimidate them or they can get rid of them, kill these witnesses. So they are, and it goes beyond the police, in fact. They also are quite adamant that they are able to corrupt other justice officials such as prosecutors, magistrates, and in the end completely evade prosecution. Those who do in fact end up in prison regard themselves as extremely unfortunate. So yes, there's a lot of complicity from police members, including some of which we now witnessed, where there is active participation of police members quite prepared to kill their colleagues.
And outside of the police service, and perhaps more broadly even beyond the issue of cash in transit heists, do you think South Africa has grappled fully with just the crisis that we have as far as the number of unlicensed firearms that are in circulation at any given time?
Yes, that is a problem. Firearms, especially illegal firearms in circulation, and there's various ways of getting hold of these firearms. We know, again, the police service and the military and to some extent private security companies have become a huge source of firearms for criminal activity. Criminals can, access the firearms in various ways. They can hire them from the police, they can buy them from the police, and they can steal them from the police. There's also a large element of negligence as far as the police and other state institutions are concerned. We know even the State Security Agency has been prominent in the media about firearms they cannot account for. So, and all of these firearms end up in the hands of criminals, and they are recirculated, and they are used for various criminal activities.
Thank you very much for that, Dr. Johan Burger with the Institute for Security Studies.